The inn loomed before me, a shadowy silhouette against the moonlit sky. Its walls, dark and weathered, seemed to breathe with a life of their own. As I stepped through the creaking door, the air grew thick with an oppressive silence. This was no ordinary place. It was the Phantom Inn, a place where the past clung to the present with a spectral grip. I had come to investigate the claims of hauntings that had plagued the inn for years. Armed with my usual arsenal of detection devices and protective charms, I felt a familiar blend of excitement and dread. The inn's history was steeped in tragedy. A former women's college turned Civil War hospital, it had seen its share of death and sorrow. The innkeeper, a gaunt man with haunted eyes, greeted me with a nod. "They're restless tonight," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You'll feel them soon enough." Ignoring the chill that crept up my spine, I made my way to the grand staircase. As I ascended, the temperature dropped sharply, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the cold air. At the top of the stairs, a faint whisper echoed through the hall. "Help us!" the voice murmured, barely audible. I followed the sound, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. It led me to a room at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I was hit by a wave of cold air and the unmistakable scent of decay. Inside, the room was bathed in a ghostly light, and I could see the faint outline of a figure by the window. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. The figure turned, revealing the translucent form of a young woman in a tattered dress. Her eyes, hollow and sorrowful, bore into mine. "We are the Forgotten," she said, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "Trapped here by pain and betrayal." I took a step closer, my protective charm glowing faintly. "How can I help you?" She pointed to a dusty, old diary on the bedside table. "Our story lies within. Find the truth and set us free." With trembling hands, I picked up the diary and began to read. It told the tale of forbidden love between a student and a soldier, their tragic fate sealed by the cruelty of war and the wrath of a jealous rival. As I read, the air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder, as if the walls themselves were mourning the lost souls. Suddenly, the room darkened, and a shadowy figure emerged from the corner. It was the rival, a spectral presence filled with rage and bitterness. "You cannot change the past," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "They belong to me." The room trembled as the ghostly figures of the students and soldiers appeared, their faces etched with sorrow and despair. I knew I had to act quickly. Holding the diary close, I recited a banishment spell, focusing all my energy on breaking the curse that bound them. The shadowy figure screamed in fury as the light from my charm intensified, engulfing the room in a brilliant glow. The ghostly figures began to fade, their expressions softening into peace. As the last of the whispers died away, the oppressive weight lifted, and the room returned to its normal state. Exhausted but relieved, I placed the diary back on the table. The inn, once filled with sorrow and unrest, now felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. As I descended the stairs, the innkeeper met me at the bottom, his eyes wide with wonder. "They're gone, aren't they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "Yes, they're free now." With a sense of accomplishment and a heavy heart, I left the Phantom Inn, knowing that the spirits of the past had finally found peace. But the memory of their sorrow and the eerie whispers would stay with me forever, a reminder of the fragile boundary between the living and the dead. The mist hung low over Gadsby's Tavern, the historic building barely discernible in the dim light of the street lamps. The tavern, once a lively hub of colonial activity, now stood silent and brooding, its faded grandeur overshadowed by an air of latent menace. I had come to uncover the truth behind the spectral legends that haunted its corridors. Inside, the tavern was unnervingly silent, each creak of the floorboards echoing through the stillness. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and a hint of something more sinister. I unpacked my gear, EMF detectors, cameras, and charms, preparing for a night of investigation. The innkeeper, an elderly woman with deeply lined features, approached me with cautious steps. "They say you can communicate with the spirits," she said, her voice a mere whisper. "We need your help." "I'll do what I can," I assured her, gripping the brass key she handed me. "Tell me about the hauntings." Her eyes flicked to the shadows. "The nameless stranger haunts us most. Her presence chills the air, and her sorrow is palpable." Determined to uncover the mystery, I climbed the stairs to the upper floors. The temperature plummeted as I neared the last room in the hallway, the nameless stranger's supposed haunt. Pushing open the door, a wave of cold air and decay assaulted my senses. A translucent figure stood near the window, her eyes filled with unspeakable sadness. "Who are you?" I asked, steadying my voice against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. She turned slowly, her gaze piercing through me. "I am the Forgotten," she murmured, her voice barely more than a sigh. "My life was stolen by betrayal and deceit. How can I help you find peace?" I inquired, my protective charm glowing faintly. She gestured towards a hidden compartment in the wall. "Within lies the truth. Reveal it and free me." With a deep breath, I opened the compartment to find an old, tattered diary. The pages told a tale of love, jealousy, and murder, a young woman wronged by those she trusted. As I read, the room darkened, and a shadowy figure emerged, its form twisted and menacing. "You cannot change the past," it snarled, its voice a chilling rasp. "She is mine to torment." The room shook as ghostly figures materialized, their faces etched with sorrow and regret. Holding the diary tight, I began reciting a banishment spell, channeling all my energy into breaking the curse. The shadowy figure screamed in fury, as light from my charm engulfed the room. The ghostly forms began to fade, their expressions softening into peace. As the last echo of their whispers died away, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Exhausted, I placed the diary back. The tavern, once heavy with sorrow, now felt lighter. The innkeeper was nowhere to be seen as I ventured to the front door. With a mix of relief and melancholy, I left Gadsby's haunt, knowing the spirits had found peace. But the memory of their anguish and the eerie whispers would stay with me. As I walked through the deserted streets of Alexandria, a sudden chill gripped me. Turning a corner, I encountered a shadowy figure, its eyes burning with malevolence. Before I could react, spectral hands reached out, pulling me into the darkness. In that moment, I knew I had failed. The protective charm around my neck flickered weakly, unable to withstand the onslaught of dark energy. I struggled against the unseen force, but it was relentless, dragging me deeper into the realm of the vengeful spirits I had tried to banish. Voices echoed around me, whispering curses and lamentations. The spirits I had disturbed exacted their revenge, their rage palpable in the air. With a final, desperate cry, I realized the irony. I had freed one soul only to become trapped myself. The world faded to darkness, the spectral figures closing in around me. The last thing I heard was the mournful wail of the nameless stranger, her sorrow now mingled with my own. The gates of Arlington National Cemetery loomed before me, wrought iron twisted into intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with an eerie life. The air was thick with the weight of countless souls, their memories seeping into the very ground beneath my feet. As a warden, my task was to investigate the spectral disturbances reported here, but even I felt a pang of trepidation. Night had fallen, casting long shadows across the rows of gravestones. I took a deep breath and stepped through the gates, my protective charms and detection devices at the ready. The stillness of the cemetery was unsettling, every rustle of leaves and distant whisper amplifying the sense of dread. As I made my way towards the older section, the temperature began to drop. My breath formed ghostly clouds in the cold air, and my EMF meter started to spike. I paused, scanning the area, when I heard it, the faint, mournful tune of a bugle playing. Taps. Following the sound, I reached a section of graves marked by crumbling headstones. There, in the moonlight, stood a ghostly figure of a bugler, his spectral form flickering like a candle in the wind. His eyes met mine, filled with a sorrow that transcended time. "Why do you linger here?" I asked softly, trying to convey empathy rather than fear. The bugler lowered his instrument, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We are the forgotten, bound by duty and regret. Our stories untold, our souls unrest. What can I do to help you find peace?" I asked, sensing the depth of his torment. He pointed to a nearby mausoleum, its door slightly ajar. "Within lies the key to our release. But beware, for a dark force guards it jealously." I nodded, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The mausoleum was a relic of another era, its entrance flanked by stone angels whose eyes seemed to follow me as I approached. Pushing the heavy door open, I stepped into the cold, dark interior. The air inside was stifling, filled with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing ancient inscriptions and cobweb-covered urns. In the center of the room stood an ornate chest, its lid adorned with symbols of protection and binding. As I reached for the chest, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form twisted and malevolent. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "They belong to me." The dark entity lunged at me, its spectral claws slicing through the air. I barely dodged, my protective charm flaring with light as I recited a banishment spell. The entity screamed in fury, its form wavering but not dissipating. I knew I had to act quickly. With trembling hands, I opened the chest to find an old bugle and a stack of letters, each one a farewell from a soldier to their loved ones. The sorrow and love within the words resonated deeply, and I could feel the weight of their sacrifice. Holding the letters close, I continued the spell, channeling the energy of the soldier's final messages. The light from my charm grew brighter, pushing back the darkness. The shadowy figure howled in agony, its form disintegrating into wisps of smoke. As the last of the darkness faded, the ghostly bugler appeared beside me, his expression one of profound relief. "Thank you," he whispered, his form becoming more translucent. "We can rest now." I watched as he and the other spectral figures began to fade, their spirits finally finding peace. The cemetery, once filled with an oppressive weight, now felt lighter, as if the very air had been cleansed. With a sense of accomplishment and a heavy heart, I left the mausoleum, the letters clutched in my hand. As I walked back through the cemetery gates, the first light of dawn began to break, casting a gentle glow over the gravestones. The spirits of Arlington had found their rest, but their stories would stay with me forever, a reminder of the sacrifices made and the thin veil between the living and the dead.